Yo, what's going on, Remedy Nation, man? I am so excited to be before you on this particular Wednesday. Listen, last Sunday, we had the opportunity to talk to fathers. Really just telling them, and the topic and the title was Father, Take Your Place. I went through some staggering statistics, percentages, numbers of people who just are in trouble. And the reason why they are in trouble is because they come from fatherless homes. Now, let's be very clear. I am a product of a fatherless home. And my mother did a great job, I believe, in raising me. But I said this past weekend that it is not normal for a child to become successful. It is an anomaly when there aren't two parents within the household. And I said, cursed is a society that wants to make the anomaly normal. That somehow, some way, that we have to figure out how to help our fathers step up, because their place in society and in families cannot be replaced and they're needed in a major way. Usually on Wednesdays for midweek, I usually piggyback off the topic of this particular Sunday, but truth be told, it was so focused that I did not want to spend another day speaking on fatherhood, so I went completely left field. And there's been a topic that's been on my heart that I wanted to speak on for a little while, and that's this idea of pride. Idea of pride. Here's a story for you. There was this woman, she went to a church. The church was absolutely amazing. Pastor was dynamic in his speaking ability, his leading ability. And no, I'm not talking about me. I'm legitimately talking about another church, another space, another place. But this woman, she went up to the pastor and she says, "Pastor, I have a real problem that I need to talk to you about." And so he looks at her and he says, "Anything," because she was a servant leader. She gave her tithe, her offering, and her time. She was always there for the ministry. The ministry was always able to take advantage of her gifts in a good way. And then, truth be told, she was always able to take advantage of her church in a good way. So he said, "Let me get through my week, and then I'll be able to sit down with you." So then he sat her down and he said, "Listen, I want to know what this big issue is, because I want to make sure that you're okay, because you mean too much and you're too valuable to us to have you walking around feeling like something is wrong." With an intent look, he looks her in her face and she looks back at him and she says, "Here's my problem, Pastor. My problem is everybody's jealous of me because I am the prettiest woman in the church." He looks at her and says, "Your problem isn't with everyone else. The real problem is that you're lying to yourself." What is the point of what I'm saying to you today? Pride will have us full of ourselves, thinking that others are always out to get us when we don't keep pride in the forefront. Here's the topic of today's conversation. Very simple. The problem with pride. The problem with pride. Now, of course, you've heard many scriptures on this in the past, right? Pride comes before the fall and things of that nature. And so I just want to help those who may struggle in this area. And how about this? I've always been honest. Things that I've had to overcome, things that I have to pray on a consistent basis. And the idea of being prideful and boastful and things of that nature, that's stuff that I've had to work on for years. Think about any person that's driven successful businesses, church, life, whatever you want to call it, call success. Those are the individuals who have to keep themselves humble, because when success comes to a certain degree, we can look at what God is doing for us and start to attribute characteristics and that success to ourselves. So if you're anything like me, that may have caught up a time or two in what's happening in your life but not giving God credit for it. I invite you to listen in today because I believe that this message will be transformative. Here it is. Look what the Bible says. Luke chapter 18. I rarely read this many verses, but I believe that it's important. It says, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now, if you know anything about tax collector, remember what I've always told you. Tax collectors were the most despised individual in the Bible. Why do you say that, Pastor? It's because they were from the community but worked for the king. So they lived and they grew up with the people that the king is taking advantage of, and the king is using them to take advantage of those people. So no one, including in this particular day and age, no one hates a person more than they hate a traitor in their eyes. So now, give you context, the Pharisees went up, and now the tax collector goes up. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, and even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. So if you look in this particular message, if you look at what we just read, there was a tax collector and there was a Pharisee, a religious person, a church man, a church-going person. They both go to pray, but when the Pharisee prays, he prays in the way not to honor God, not to figure out what's wrong with him so that he can become better. He says, I am so glad that I'm not like this tax collector. And so innately what he's doing is he's praising what he is and what he's become while downing and disrespecting another individual. But what's unique about this is because we would think that that will come from a person like a tax collector, a person with money, a person with prestige, a person with a house probably, a person with notoriety in the community. And even though many people didn't like him, I can guarantee you that he had a circle that did accept him. But when he went to pray, he said, God, be merciful on me. I am just a sinner. So what he's doing is switching the focus not on other people, but he's putting the focus on himself. Putting the focus on himself getting better versus the Pharisees putting the attention on others to justify who he is. I want to be very clear, and here is my first point, is that the way that you can dispel getting into prideful situations and into prideful places, you always have to begin with yourself. You always have to begin with yourself. That's why when we pray, the first thing we do is we always give God glory. But before we start talking about and judging the character of people around us, sometimes we have to take, and I've used this word for the last few weeks, inventory on who we are. Because it is the moment in which we think we can stand. That's the moment that I've seen so many people fall. Where you think that the messages that you preach and the messages that you teach don't apply to you. That you believe that everything that the Bible says to correct and to reproof yourself, it doesn't apply to you because of your title, because of how long you've been a Christian, because of how many times you've been to church. And I want to be the first person to say, and for those who have grown up in church, you will see that some of the messiest people that I've ever seen in my life are those who may come into church, speak in tongues, but when they leave, they barely speak to people. And their idea is that they are too high to come down. When the reality is that when you start talking about the most humble figure that we can ever set our eyes on, he was so high. But yet and still, he humbled himself to put himself into the flesh of a man, to walk this earth, to be as low as he could be, in order to win over the souls of you and I who are lost. You have to begin with yourself. The reason why this tax collector is able to walk away with a smile on his face, but not only a smile on his face, but I believe a smile on God's proverbial face, is because he stood there and he said, before I talk about anybody, I need to figure out what God has for me. Now, I want to be very clear, even with the tax collector and even with the Pharisees, there's nothing wrong with who the Pharisee is. Because a lot of times I feel like we like to be judgmental on church people because there are certain standards that we try to live by. When they say, I don't drink, we try to judge them. Or if they say that we don't like to go out, or we don't like to speak a certain way, we don't like to put certain things in our body, people feel like that in itself is judgmental, when truth be told, there's nothing wrong with following certain regulations and rules and certain commands that the Bible give us. But when we use those rules, those commands to justify us hating or judging others, then that's when it goes south. And I also want to be very clear that there is a difference between judgment and then certain things that we use to correct a person. Because in the church, it seems like any type of correction that comes from leadership, any type of correction that comes from those who, quote unquote, are regular members of churches, people try to use that as a way to cast judgment, but it is not. What we are saying is that for some reason, God has given us insight, sometimes foresight, on what's to come if you continue down the path. And it is not to judge you, it is to help you. The same way that the word helps us, the same way that the word convicts us, the same way that the word will have us turning away from our wicked ways, or from what we long for most, which is pleasure. And what if I told you that sometimes the most pleasurable things to us, when it's not done in the correct way, it will cause us to be so far from God. And what we are trying to do, myself, my wife, our team, we're trying to help the community of believers go to another level. But we understand that we are not exempt from falling. We understand that we are not exempt from mistakes. We understand that we have not lived perfect lives. And because that's something that we acknowledge, we are starting with ourselves before we are trying to help other people. Okay, here it is. The sinner, or when he said, I tell you, this sinner, not the Pharisees, he returned home justified. The quote unquote sinner returned home justified, and the Pharisees didn't. And God is saying, you heard this before you talk about the speck in one person's eye, talk about the log that's in yours. And shamed is the man who talks about the speck in somebody else's eye, but don't deal with the log that's in their eye. I want you to do inventory of your life right now. Think about the people that you talk to on a consistent basis. think about them and think about the conversations that you have with them. What if I suggested to you that if you are on the phone with a person and the primary reason why you're on the phone is not to just talk about the great things in life, but what if I told you that every time you talk on the phone with this person or with those people, that the primary reason is to talk about others? What if I said to you that in so many ways, that's a sin? Because the Bible always says, judge lest you want to be judged. Meaning that God has so much that he can put out on you. I tell people, you know the things that I've told you. You've known the things that they were on social media, but you don't know the things that only myself and God knows. And if some of those things came out, I would not have room in my life to talk about the errors for other people. And these kind of people you have to watch out for. These kind of people, they're always in categories, right? They always feel like they're being attacked, or they have to attack, or they feel like they always have to defend. I'll say it this way. A prideful person is always in attack mode, or they're always in defense mode. So for whatever reason, even going back to the verse that we just talked about, for whatever reason, the Pharisee automatically was in attack mode. And anytime a person is in attack mode and he's attacking a person who has nothing to do with them, or he's attacking a person who is not trying to harm them in any way, whether it be physically, communication-wise, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the moment he opened up his mouth, he was on attack mode. That is a clear indication that something is wrong with their level of pride, because they attack to protect a persona that they're trying to keep up. Be wary of individuals that when you talk to them on the phone, they will rather attack than be corrected. And then also I said they're either in attack mode or defense mode, that whenever you speak to them, they cannot take correction and they try to justify everything that they do. Listen, the reason why I did that is because of this. And I understand that you may not like it, but the reason why I did it is because I needed to understand. And so and it's either attack mode or it's either defense mode. That is a clear indication that pride some way, somehow is in the mix. But I want to keep on coming through the Bible. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3, it says this: why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but you don't notice the log in your own eye? We talked about that. Here's another verse. Revelations chapter 3, verse 17. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, I need nothing. You do not realize that you are wretched, that you're poor, that you're blind, and naked. Okay, pay attention. You say that you're rich. You say that you've prospered. You say you need nothing. But when you remove all of the blessings, listen, that God has given you, when you remove all of the extensive things that you worked for, the money, the car, the clothes, the house, if you strip yourself of that, my question is, what do you have? And I believe that a lot of times we get caught up on what God has given us, so much so that we claim it as our own. And what God is saying in this particular verse, you think you don't need anything, but everything that you have, I've given. So truth be told, you have nothing, so you're poor. Everything that you've clothed yourself in, I've given to you. But I believe he is not saying this to make you feel bad. I believe that he is saying this so that you can remember where you came from. Remember where you came from. Remember where you came from. Something doesn't sit well with me even when I say that. Remember where you came from. And the reason why I don't really like what I'm saying is because it sounds like you have the strength to move yourself from point A to point B. I've learned this, and if there's anything I've learned within this Christian walk, I don't have the strength to do anything, that even when I wake up, it is God giving me strength. So it is not me remembering where I came from or you remembering where you came from, because you will still be in the places that you chose to be if it was not for the power of Jesus. So let me rephrase myself. Remember where he brought you from. Because when you remember where he brought you from, then you will understand that everything that you have belongs to the Lord. Your children belong to the Lord. Your paycheck belongs to the Lord. Your life belongs to the Lord. Your husband belongs to the Lord. Your wife belongs to the Lord. Your promotion belongs to the Lord. And when you remember that fact, it's hard to get caught up in what you have, because when you think about the goodness of Jesus Christ and all that he's done for you, you sit back and you say, you get the credit. And I can go back and remember places in which I've gotten myself in trouble, in places I shouldn't have been, things that I shouldn't have partook in, but I still did it. And yet and still you snatched me out of that place, snatched me out of dead places, snatched me out of places I wasn't supposed to be. And you put me and you positioned me and you've placed me in the situation that I'm in today. So it is not remembering where I came from or where you came from. It is remembering where God brought you from and got you out of. That's the God that we serve. But that right there will keep you humble. It will keep you humble. Listen, this is what I put down here. If you ever forget to remember where you came from, what God had to do and overlook to love us into his kingdom, and then the truth of the wretched conditions of our life that lies hidden from the surface, then we will embrace spiritual pride into our lives. It is saying this, that if we don't really pay attention to all the things that God had to overlook in order for us to be where we are today. I don't know about you, but there are certain mistakes that I don't think I've ever gotten punished for, because God had to turn a blind eye. And if I had to take punishment for all the things that I've done in the dark, then I would be in a bad place. Just a thought can put me in a bad place. A conversation can put me in a bad place. A desire can put me in a bad place. And even when I had the desire and I went for the desire, even when I had the thought and I went after the thought, even when I've done all of this stuff, the reality is that in certain ways, God said, I got too much planned for you to take you out with this decision. So somehow, some way, I'm not only going to overlook it, but I'm going to cover you in the midst of you trying to figure out who you are in Christ. There are so many things that God has overlooked. And when you remember that, then there's no way that you can get caught up in who you are, because everything that you are is who he created you to be. It's something about this word humility, that keeps on ringing in my head. Because humility is this idea that you understand it is only by the grace of God that you have the opportunity to stand. It's not your speaking ability or your preaching or your teaching. It's not that you went to school. It's not that you married right at a young age. It is not because you have kids by one person. It's not because you are flawless. It is because of grace. And the idea of grace is unmerited favor. Unmerited. Meaning, like, we could not do anything to gain that particular favor. The favor that had you passing tests that you didn't study for. The favor that had you leaving places without diseases after you've made choices to be with people that you didn't have a clue where they were maybe a month before then, a day before then for some people. That you're not dealing with certain bodily issues after you've put so much poison inside of your body. That you are not in jail for some of the things that you've done in business. That God still continued to cover you. And that right there, my friend, is grace. And when you are full of grace, there's certain heights that you can't get up to. Because grace will weigh you down to the point where you understand that it is only by his might and his power that you have the opportunity to do anything. Here's a story, and I'm leaving on this. There were two brothers. These two brothers, they were raised on a farm. They were raised on a farm. And one brother, he wanted to go off to school. He wanted to study finances. He wanted to figure out how to change and shake up the business world. The other brother, he stayed at the farm. Now, the brother who chose to go to school, which is a great thing to do, he finally got his first job on Wall Street. Got his first job on Wall Street, and he was helping millionaires become even richer. Teaching people about the stock exchange and the stock market. And one day he came back to the farm where he felt like his brother had a lowly job. He said, "Brother, you could have done anything with your life. Look at me. I drive a nice car. I date nice women. I live in a lavish place. People know my name everywhere I go. And yet and still, look at you. You're just a lowly farmer." His brother looked at him and he said to him, he said, "Look out there in the wheats. Look out there where you see all of the wheat growing." He said, in some of the wheat stalks, you'll see the head, the wheat head. He said, some of them are standing straight up. He said, but then right next to the few that are standing straight up, there are some that's bent over. And he said, do you know why the wheat stalk is standing straight up? He said, because inside of that head is practically empty. But the one that is hunched over, that head is full. He said, one thing that I've come to find out is that those who walk with their chest in the air and their head held high based off of their accomplishments, many times they're empty. But those who are full of gratitude, thanksgiving, full of grace-filled moments, we don't even fight to stand in pride. We stay bent over because it shows how much God is filling us on a consistent basis. So the same way that this man is saying a heavy plant can't stand up straight, what I am saying is that a heavy person, they can't gloat. And so here is what I said. Heavy things don't float. In the same way, heavy people don't gloat. When you are full of this grace, full of this unmerited favor, full of what God has done for you, it's hard for you to say that you've done it on your own. And God has a funny way of humbling those who exalt themselves. Be weary of individuals when you are around them. Their only goal is to tell you how great they are, how much you can't ascertain, levels that you can't imagine being on, because it's always in justification of them being able to keep their head up in pride. I'm encouraging every person who is watching, allow God to feel you, because when he feels you, the weight of his glory is so heavy that it will keep you low. And it is not in pride where you will receive your blessings. It is down on your knees, praising God, in whom all blessings flow, that more will be able to be poured out over your life. I remember coming up in ministry, a man named Elder Reno would always say that even when a person is trying to give you credit for what God is doing in your life, you always say, "To God be the glory." It is always your answer. It is not to be religious, but it's to let them know that no matter how many times I've gone to school, no matter how many times I've preached in the mirror, that even on my off days, if somebody's life is changed, then the reality is it's not me. It's all him. Stay holy, stay humble, and stay hungry is what my pastor has always told me. And that's the way to get away from pride. So I pray that whoever, that you're encouraged, that this is a reminder that everything that God is doing in your life, it is not because of you, but God has a certain plan for your life that you just can't get caught up in, that you have to give him glory for. And I believe that when you divert all attention to him, it gives you space, room, and opportunity to grow in ways that you could never, ever, ever comprehend. Man, listen, that is it for today. I pray that it blesses you beyond measure, but listen to me. I really, really, really want you to get prepared for our Water Weekend. What is Water Weekend? Water Weekend is an opportunity for us to, one, celebrate freedom, because it is on the 4th of July. Okay, what do you mean by freedom? I'm not talking about Independence Day. No, I am talking about God dying so that we can be free to accept him willingly and to love him in ways he loves us, or we can at least try to love him the way that he loves us. Freedom to walk around and say his name. Freedom to know that if anything ever happened to the saint, that we will be able to be up there with him. Freedom. And you know what they say, where the Spirit of God is, there's freedom. So that's the freedom that I'm talking about, but it also gives us the opportunity to just have fun with our families. Bouncy houses, free food, and just a good time. And you guys gotta know your pastor is a line dance king. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready for every line, and I want to learn more. So if that's you, I want you to come out on the 4th of July. But then also, most importantly, it'll be our first baptism. And if you haven't signed up, pay attention. You can go online right now and sign up for baptism, and I would be overjoyed for you to get into the pool, for us to take you underwater. What does it represent? Me going down one way, but me coming up new, fresh, white as snow. Can you get baptized more than once? Absolutely. Pastor, I haven't got baptized in 10 years, and I think I want to do it again. I welcome you. There is no mandate. There is no cutoff. Pastor, I just joined Remedy. I want to get baptized by you. Fine and dandy. I just want you to be ready for what God is going to do in your life, even after this happens. Listen, of course, if you don't know Jesus, I want you to text the number below, because our team is they're always ready for you to text so that we can say the salvation prayer with you. Listen, I really do this on Wednesdays, but hey, if you are watching and you're not a member of our community, a member of our church, listen, there are easy steps in place for you to be connected. What is the connection for? The connection is just for us to be able to pray for you by name, for us to be able to look out for you when you need help, for us to say, you taking the time to sacrifice to be a part of our lives, so we want to make sure that we are intentional in being a part of your life. So you'll see 4 easy steps to become a member here. And then last but not least, thank you guys for consistently giving to the vision that God has given my wife and I. I pray that we are making you proud, that every time you turn on or every time you come into the sanctuary, that you are pleased with what you see. And I'm hoping that the God that we serve will continue to bring liberation to your life and to help you through, specifically for those who are always sacrificing tithe and offering. Some of you guys just give $20 on Wednesday just because you got a word. And I thank you for those seeds. Listen, you know how I'm gonna end it. I hope that I continue to end this way for the next 20 years. What am I gonna say? I love you, but God, He loves you. He loves you so much more. Peace.